Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believes that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Oregon in the US by Michelle Hawk. Thank you, Michelle, so much for being here, for taking the time, for connecting once more. And for everybody that is watching and listening to us, and perhaps they don't know about you and your journey, what can you share?
Thank you, Brian. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show and to connect with your audience. I am hoping to share some valuable tools today about alchemy and transformation. My journey began as a magical young kiddo, as I know all kiddos are magical and intuitive. And then often what happens as we grow up is we have layers of societal conditioning and education and systems imposed upon us that makes us disconnect from that. I am very, very fortunate to have not totally lost touch with that. I had, very supportive family, very loving family of origin, and I stumbled into my first shamanic workshop as a teenager. I was 15 years old, and this was 2003. And now, of course, you can Google shaman near me and you find all sorts of workshops or online courses. And that really wasn't true at the time. So I came across this workshop and it just made sense to me. It gave me a vocabulary for everything that I already knew to be true. As a kid, as I mentioned, I was interested in animals and nature and animistic philosophy. And as we know, animism is the foundation of all shamanic practice and the earth-based spirituality where we view all things are alive and all things are connected through this universal aliveness. And I know kids are usually animists. Kids usually have this vision of, the plants are talking and the rocks are talking. And that is really the foundation of this worldview that we see in not only shamanism, but other mystery schools as well. So I found I was home. I felt very at home in this world, and I started pursuing my shamanic studies. I was going to a lot of kind of workshops and classes here and there. And then in 2009, I met my current shaman mentor. I've been working with her ever since then. And she is the one who initiated me into my primary lineage of practice, which comes from what is now Hungary. But I have also studied with teachers from like Celtic shamanic traditions, and then also the Americas, North and South America as well. So I've been on quite the long-term trajectory of my studies and practice. Shamanism is my primary, one of my primary lineages that I work with. And also I've studied tremendously in energy healing, mediumship, and also alchemy. I began my practice with alchemy in, I think, 2015 or 2016. And through that was kind of the other layer of things clicking into place and just making so much sense for me as not only an energy medicine practitioner, a spiritual practitioner, but I'm also a scientist. My degree is in biology, specializing in animal behavior. And so for me, science and spirituality have always gone like this. So then I find alchemy, which is science and spirituality like this, and it just feels so good to me. It just makes so much sense. So I developed and I teach a 200-hour alchemy certification course that I offer yearly. I'm halfway through my 5th cohort right now. It's a year-long apprenticeship deep dive into these mysteries, and it's so much fun. It's one of my favorite things that I do, honestly.
Wow. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing that. I find it a lot of times really interesting hearing people's stories because, of course, we all, like as you're saying, we all come here and we are, in this magical space in a sense until we get conditioned. And, some of us that's earlier, some of us it's a little bit later. And how it is that then we can, reconnect for the ones that we disconnected. Like, I know that that was my case. Like, just until I was the same as a teenager that I started to discover all of these different practices, like, I actually was super disconnected. And then I was like, oh, wow, there's something here. And I started to go into all of those and just go deeper and just made this as well my path with different lineages, different traditions, different perspectives. Yet I have found, and I don't know if this is true for you, that most of it actually fits all together. Like, I haven't really found, I actually found a few during the years, a few different techniques that they were like, you cannot use this with anything else. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense for me. Everything fits, everything has a place, everything actually, different language perhaps, but everything is coming together. And I love this, like the coming together as well of what you're saying of the science and all of these different spiritual traditions, because this is part of my path. Like, I did my postgrad studies in neuroscience, and it's part of how can I bring these seemingly different worlds together, because they are the same, really.
Absolutely. Well, and especially with something like neuroscience too, and in emergent fields of trauma work and epigenetics and inherited trauma, and then also, the spiritual aspects of our own, not necessarily inherited through the bio form, but inherited through our soul lineage as well, and looking at the like the energetic memories that we carry of life experiences and of our own and our ancestors and our past lives. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I love, Michelle, like, for those perhaps that are watching us that don't know much about shamanism or about alchemy, if you can share a little bit about both of those.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with shamanism. So, because I started with shamanism in my work. So shamanism is and I'm using this as a broad term because it really is a broad umbrella term. And, there's a little bit of debate about where that word came from. And even using that word in the modern Western context, it's a very charged term. So I do acknowledge there's a lot of emotional and energetic charge and the tone of cultural appropriation and extractiveness. The word shaman as a broad term refers to, or shamanism refers to earth-based spiritual practice that is ubiquitous to indigenous peoples all over the world. So we see these, and again, these are animistic practices, they're earth-based practices, and they're connected with the spirit world. So these are the common features that we see across shamanic tradition. And then, of course, within different cultures and communities, there are particularities. So you have different representations, different gods or goddesses or spiritual forces that you're working with according to the context of each of these different traditions. So, for example, in different lineages in South American shamanism, which is very emergent in pop culture consciousness right now of working with ayahuasca or working with sacred plant medicines. This is one tiny slice of the shamanic pie, people. This is not the entirety of shamanism, but it's working with these animistic lineages and communicating with the medicine spirits and communicating with the medicine spirits through the vehicles of sacred plant medicine. And then in other shamanic traditions, such as the lineage that I am primarily initiated into through what is now Hungary, there is not a tradition of working with the sacred plant medicines in the entheogenic sense, but there are relationships with spirits of the earth, the elements. There's a very large component of sound healing and singing and drumming in the tradition that I hold. And so working with and invoking the medicine spirits for the purpose of healing through different vehicles. And so again, all of those are unique to the cultural particularities and the context that they come from. But what they all have in common is that they're anchored into animistic consciousness and anchored into our earth-based vehicle of life and our spiritual understanding of that. And then the word shaman too, there's, kind of the common definition is that it comes from, made up by white anthropologists to describe this role that they were seeing of the medicine person in these different communities, coming from the, what's the language? Tungusic language of the Siberian people, right? But then in my lineage, they also say, okay, that word shaman comes from the Mesopotamian tradition, where the priests who worshipped and served the sun god Shamash were the shaman to serve the sun god. And so then, okay, there's even a little bit of, well, where did that even come from? It's, it kind of matters and it kind of doesn't. It's, it's again like and of course, all of these different traditions have their own word for that person in their community. So shamanism, again, a hotly contested and charged word in and of itself, but really referring to this thing that is true for all people and like true to our original nature as citizens of Earth, citizens of Gaia, and connecting with our earthly nature and our spiritual nature.
Mm.
Okay,
Beautiful.
so that's my not so short definition of shamanism. Should we do
That's
alchemy
great.
now?
Yes.
Okay, great, awesome. People, I hope you're still with me. Stay tuned. We're still going. So alchemy, again, let's look at the pop culture definition of alchemy. We see in things like Harry Potter, right, where they're talking about the Philosopher's Stone. In pop culture version of alchemy, we think of this as the process of turning lead into gold. And again, this is just one little tiny micro aspect of what alchemy really is, which is, instead of thinking about it just through the lens of metals, turning lead into gold, it's the process, the art and the science, the spirit and the science of transmuting base material into its most activated, elevated, actualized, illuminated form. And these are universally applicable principles. So whether that is metals that someone's working with from lead into gold, or primarily within the self of the alchemist, our own consciousness, our own beingness, our own eternal spirit, and our health in the body, and the love in our hearts, and our relationships, our homes, all aspects of our lives, going through this process of transmutation to come into the most aligned, fully actualized, authentic version of the self that we are.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that, and I love so many of the things that you share, both about shamanism and about alchemy. One, and this is one of the things that I have seen throughout many years in the conscious spiritual communities, that a lot of times there's not that much groundedness, there's not that much earth. And this has been part of my path. It's like being grounded, being here, and opening to understanding the interconnectedness of everything, whether that's, like more of a earth-based connection, or whether that's more, like beings or any other energies. And I think that for me, at least, this is part of the path that I believe that we need a lot. We need to be grounded. We need to be in connection with what we are. Like, it's one of the things that I usually tell people. Like, we don't live on Earth. We are Earth.
Yeah.
Like, and there's a perspective that we are, in a sense, separate. And therefore, it seems that that's the case. And there's another perspective that we are just all energy intermingling and connecting. And how do we use that? And I think that this, for me as well, is part of where the transmutation and the alchemy comes into place. That like, if everything is that and everything can be transformed and transmuted, then what am I doing with my life, and how is my path to allow that transformation to take place? And to understand as well, as we were talking at the beginning, we've been conditioned with society. How is it that we are blocking our own transformations? So
Yes.
I'd love for you to share a little bit on that, like in terms of your work and what you see in terms of, this, that we are blocking ourselves.
Yes, Brian, you hit on some really important pieces in what you just shared about, our ungroundedness, and that's like a whole other podcast episode right there. And then also how we're blocking, or we're somehow getting stuck or resisting this process of transformation. So let's acknowledge Alchemy is based in universal law. It is not something that humans made up. This is a very ancient and primal spiritual technology that is the same process of transformation that we see going through the seasons. So here in the northern hemisphere, it's getting cold. We're heading into winter. I know in the southern hemisphere, you're just heading into summer, right? But we have this continual cycle of the changing of the seasons, and the trees drop their leaves and go into a period of rest, and then spring always comes afterwards. So we have this, on the yearly scale. We also have this on the daily scale of the sun rises and sets, and we have day and night. And so when we're living in this modern culture where a lot of people, spend a lot of time on screens and on the internet, here we are on a screen right now, but yeah, people can have a lot of convenience and electricity. Like some people just don't go outside at all during the day, which I find so strange and unfathomable. I have a dog who I have to walk every single day, so I have to go outside no matter what. And I find that the more time I spend outside and the more time that I'm spending in my body, moving, observing nature, and connecting with the natural rhythms of Earth and with the movement of the stars and the planets, the more connected I am with my own ability to participate in the cycle of transformation. And the less afraid I am. And this is something that I've noticed of, people who feel stuck or trapped or resistant or afraid in their lives. You might be looking around, and some of you tuning in, you might be looking around at your life saying like, gosh, I'm in this job I hate. I'm in this relationship that I know isn't the right fit for me. I live in this house that I'm just kind of tolerating, and it's really not the place that I want to be in, but I just don't know what to do. And I feel afraid. I feel stuck. I feel lost. I'm just not even sure how to go about making a change, even though I'm very uncomfortable in this experience. And I know this isn't what I want. You're not alone. Unfortunately, a lot of people have that experience, and a lot of people have that experience because we live in a culture that has become very disconnected from the natural process of change and transformation. We have heat and we have air conditioning. So if you're inside all day, you can kind of keep at a static temperature of 68 degrees all year round, no matter what, right? And so it's this very weird, isolating, ungrounding process of actually moving through a cycle of change. And, you can just turn the lights on. It doesn't matter if it's dark outside. So it's the more we're relying on these false systems, granted, it's convenient. It's nice to, to have the heat on automatically in the house. Like as it's getting cold out here, I'm very grateful for my fireplace, but I'm not separate from the cycle. Like I still go participate in the cycle. And so as people are afraid or not understanding, another thing I like to tell my alchemy students is choose change before change chooses you. Mm-hmm. And we all know this feeling too. Again, if you're in that relationship that isn't right, if you're in a job you hate, and then all of a sudden you keep getting the signs of this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right, and then bam, you get the universal slap in the face of the thing that you've been avoiding taking action on happens, whether you're ready for it or not. And you feel like you're being dragged behind the car of change while change is in the driver's seat. Like, haha, I told you, sucker, like, let's go. And this is avoidable, people. The reason why this happens is because people are afraid, because people don't understand how transformation actually works, because people feel separate from these cycles of natural law. And so then how do we fix that? How do we adjust that? Part of it, Brian, that you mentioned is the grounding piece. Part of it is stabilizing in, the dynamic nature that it is to be alive. Because our entire aliveness, like balance is dynamic, balance isn't static. So our bodies are always moving through cycles, whether it's hormonal cycles or health cycles or different biorhythms. The earth outside always moving through these cycles. And so coming into relationship with that and demystifying the process of transformation, like I talk about in my alchemy course, is one of the most powerful ways that we can shift from being afraid of change or resistant to change, instead to feeling empowered and confident, collaborating with the natural laws of transformation in order to shift our consciousness, our health, our well-being, our relationships, our jobs, our homes, our planetary consciousness, even just beyond us personally, shifting this into the collective experience, as I know so many of us are here to do.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. For everybody that is still here with us, rewind that back and listen to that again, because there's so much that is important there to understand. I think that this is part of the things that I find the same, like, and I've been conditioned in the same ways, and we have all been conditioned in the same ways. And I think that, as you're saying, that's this demystifying it, because people think that it's only happening to them, that they are, like in that place of stuck, or they are unable to make changes, or they are in that fearful space. Like, well, this is what we've been conditioned with, and now it's that, that I keep on telling everyone, especially my students at university, that because they are still like really, really young, and they are trying to, like understand things. And I'm like, don't wait until you hit rock bottom, which is what you shared, until the universe slaps you in the face. Don't wait until then. Like, for me, it's all about the preventative approach. Like if I am taking care of my energy, of my being in all ways, like in mental ways, physical ways, energetic ways, spiritual ways, in relational ways, then there's a likelihood that I'm going to prevent a lot of things from taking place. So how do we do this? And it's important, like to understand, okay, there's different ways. And one of the most important ones is, as you're saying, being open to choosing. I do a lot of ancestral healing circles, and one of the things that keeps on showing up a lot of times is how we are entangled with those energies, and we are choosing the same thing as our ancestors did. So therefore, we are not choosing, and being able to decide to choose something different, and to be able to understand, okay, honoring what has happened, honoring what came before, and choosing from this moment on something different. And for that, as you're saying, like this requires transformation and change. And one of the things that, universal law, as you're saying, change is constant. We're always changing, whether we're trying to resist it or not. So, how do we do this? Of course, for everyone, it's going to be slightly different, but I would love for you, Michelle, to share a little bit on some of the different ways that you, through your processes, you support people to transform, or to choose.
Awesome. Well, how about I walk us through the cycle of alchemy? Does that sound good?
Beautiful.
Awesome. Okay, great. Yeah. So people, if you're wondering, gosh, Michelle, how do I do that? And gosh, Brian, you make it sound so easy. People, this is, so as I mentioned, I teach a 200-hour alchemy certification training. I'm going to give you the drop in the bucket version of this. And so as I walk you through this, please understand that the cycle of alchemy is a roadmap to how transformation works. This is, and again, I've been studying and practicing different healing and spiritual modalities for over 20 years now. And this is the most effective tool I have ever come across to help people actually transform, because it is the roadmap of transformation. That's what it does. That's all it is this is how transformation works. So what I have found is, for people who are, feeling afraid, feeling resistant, looking at their lives and saying, gosh, I really want to make a different choice, Brian, like you were saying, I want to choose something different. How do I go about doing that? This is your blueprint. And I will also say, for all of you tuning in, I'm going to throw out a whole bunch of terms at you. You can just let it wash over you, because I have a free guide on my website that you can download that's going to help you go a little deeper with this and identify where you are in the cycle of alchemy, which stage you're in, and also identify where people usually get stuck in the cycle. So if you're feeling a little stuck in the cycle of transformation, you can go download the guide and I'll help you figure out where you are and what to do about it, because I've got tools and practices for each of the stages. So don't worry, you don't have to take any notes or anything right now. I've got it all written down for you. So that'll be, I'm sure, in the show notes. Okay, awesome. So with all of that being said, let's take a journey together. Okay, so the cycle of alchemy is divided into 3 phases, which are called the death phase, purification phase, and rebirth phase. So that right there, notice we start with death. Usually when I ask people, how do you think transformation works? Or if you want to transform something in your life, where do you start? People usually start with, oh, I think about what I want to grow into, or I visualize, I imagine, and I make a vision board. So they start with the ideas. And there is a place and a time for that in the cycle of transformation, but it's not first. It's actually almost halfway through. Okay, so just keep in mind, just as we were talking about the cycle of the seasons, the leaves need to fall and decompose, and then spring comes afterwards. Transformation starts with death. So remember, death, purification, rebirth. These 3 phases are further subdivided into 7 stages. We have 2 stages in the death phase, 2 stages in the purification phase, and 3 stages in the rebirth phase. So the very first stage in the cycle of alchemy is called calcination. Calcination is the loss and death of physical structures. And we see this calcination in our lives can be losing a job, losing a loved one, ending a relationship, moving to a new house. Even cleaning out your closet can be a calcination type activity. If you're getting rid of old stuff that doesn't fit, or old things that you don't wear anymore because it's attached to this old aspect of your identity. So there's the loss and death of physical structures. And your relationship, in this case, your relationship, your job, these are physical structures that you're releasing as well. You're ending some version of your earthly existence that used to be part of your identity. And so we start with calcination, we start with the endings. And again, this is either something you can choose. You can choose to quit your job, or you can wait in the job you hate until you get fired. So we have that, again, choose change before change chooses you. Second stage, still in the death phase, is called dissolution, like dissolving. Now, this is the loss or death of energetic and emotional structures. This is where people do a lot of grief work, a lot of processing, a lot of transmuting the etheric architecture of the identity that was tied to those physical structures that were released. So when you quit your job, or you lose your job, or you end a relationship, there's naturally a process of reflection and, okay, that version of myself who I was in that relationship doesn't exist anymore. So I'm letting go of that part of my identity. I am grieving whatever attachments I had so that I can move forward. Okay, that's a very normal part. Now let's look at what happens if you skip that stage. I'm sure we can imagine. Has anyone been doing that before? Like, you end a relationship or a job, and then you just end up dating a different version of the same person, right? Okay, that's because you skipped the dissolution stage. So it's really, really important to actually have the death of that version of yourself that made those choices, that chose that person, that chose that kind of job, that allowed you to have a boss who took you for granted. Okay, so it's really, really important to not skip the death stages.
Yeah.
Okay, making sense so far?
Yes.
Sound good?
And I just to put my 2 cents here, death is so important for life. Like that's one of the things that in our society, and I have spoken about this in many episodes, so we don't need to go into it too much here. Death is really important because it's part of the cycles, it's part of the rhythms, it's part of how change happens. And it's something that our society mostly tries to not talk about, and it's a taboo topic, and it's an important one. So yes. Beautiful.
Totally. And the fear of loss is one of the biggest reasons why people don't actually make the changes that they want to or know that they need to in their lives. So when we understand that, death isn't forever, death is temporary. Like, we know this is one of the biggest things that my alchemy students tell me, like, is has the biggest impact for them is trusting the stages of alchemy and trusting the cycle, because we know death is the beginning, but there's this whole other part that comes afterwards. So yes, it might be uncomfortable to intentionally go through a loss process, but because of that, we get to create something new. Yeah, so very, very important. Awesome, Brian. I'm glad you've got other episodes on that. So let's just refer all your people back to those for more on death. Great. Okay, so after this, we shift into the purification phase. So remember, we started in the death phase. We have 2 stages in the death phase. Now we're in the purification phase. This is where people usually want to start the process of alchemy, because the 3rd stage is called separation. This is where we get to put our brains to work, where we're analyzing. We have the sorting process where we're saying, okay, here's what I really liked about this job. Here's what I really didn't like about this job. Here's all the stuff that I learned that I'm going to carry forward with me. And here's the parts that I never, ever want to do again. Okay, this is where we have the perspective and the discernment. And we also start to imagine, okay, what do I need to bring in for the next one? What are the new things that I'm adding into the mix? Okay, separation is where we get to make our lists and our vision boards, which people like to start there. And then for stage 4, we move into conjunction stage. And this is the second part of the purification. Now, conjunction, you can think of like the first form. This is the rudimentary form. And so here, let's imagine you write a book. Is the first draft of your book the final version?
No.
No, right, because we still have more editing to do, but it's the first draft. This is the first form. And just like, okay, say you end a job that you've been in for a long time. So your first form here might be you're working on your resume, you get a temp job somewhere else, or you have like a trial period with another company. This may not be the final version. It's like, okay, let's work out the kinks here. You're going to do 6 months of trial period and then get promoted. Okay, so it's a rudimentary form that's not the final version. Or you start dating new people, and there's that point where like you're dating, you're not in a relationship, so it's like not the final version, but you're like feeling it out. Okay, these are all versions of conjunction. Now, where people get stuck here is they mistake this rudimentary form, the first form, for the final version. You're not done yet, people. You still got 3 more stages of alchemy to go. Okay, so we keep going into the rebirth phase. Now we're in the rebirth phase, and people usually start to get excited with this because it's like, okay, we've made a lot of progress. This is great. So now our 5th stage of alchemy is called fermentation. This is one that tends to trip people up. So let's imagine, Brian, have you ever made kombucha or sauerkraut or beer or anything? Yeah, okay. So as anyone else who has practiced fermentation, we know that part of the process of fermentation is just letting it sit there, right? Because if you poke it and you stir it and you mess with it, you can actually disrupt the process and you kill it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know part of fermentation is you let it sit. But then what happens is this really beautiful reanimation. And in the spiritual aspect of alchemy, we call this the spiritization, the reanimation, where by letting something sit and rest, you can think about this also as like in Christian mysticism, they have this very beautiful alchemical story of Yeshua being crucified on the cross, going through this death process, going into the cave to rest, and then becoming immortal, basically being resurrected, right? So that metaphor and that story is really also what we're seeing in chemical fermentation. You've got this, jar of rotting cabbage that if you let it sit long enough, eventually the microbes start to do their work and they create something very beautiful and healthy and full of life and full of probiotics. Okay, so the same is true of our process. Imagine you wrote your book. You have your first draft. What is the number one thing that most people are tempted to do with the first draft of their book?
Start editing.
Start editing right away. And what is the number one mistake? To edit right away. You let it sit, right? Because we know if you start editing your book right away, it's going to be a mess. So you let it rest. Okay. And same with like you start dating a new person, you're not going to get engaged tomorrow. You got to let it stabilize, figure it out, go on a bunch of dates. And then at some point in that relationship, there's that, it comes to life. At some point, it goes from dating to a relationship where there's this other force that comes in, the force of love, the force of spirit that comes in to bring this new thing to life. Okay, so that's the fermentation stage of alchemy, is the simultaneously the resting and then the infusion of spirit, the enlivening. Okay, and then after that, we shift into the sixth stage of alchemy, which is called distillation. Here's another alcohol-related term. And as we know, in chemical distillation, it's a repeated process of evaporation and condensation that ends up creating this very pure, very concentrated substance. And in our personal process of distillation, it's the practice of energetic evaporation and condensation. So there's different meditation practices that we can do associated with this to circulate our energy, circulate our chi. But what we're doing is we're coming into what is the core truth of the essence of who we are, of what this work is, of what this relationship is. It's coming into that very pure, very concentrated core truth. And then we reach the final stage of alchemy, which is called coagulation. And this is the actualization. This is where you have made the philosopher's stone, which is the end product of alchemy. And the philosopher's stone is the completed version, the actualized version of yourself as you are now. And so this stage is, even calling it the final stage of alchemy is a little bit of a misnomer, because as I've been saying this whole time, alchemy is a cycle. So what we do here is we celebrate and enjoy and also prepare to enter the cycle again, because there will be another version of you and another version of you for your entire life.
Beautiful. Thank you.
There you have it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those. I haven't actually heard it in this way, the process, and of course, it makes so much sense. It's as you're saying, I think that this is part of the things of this is how universal laws work, and to understand different processes of how that works is so important. And I love especially the last part that you mentioned in terms of it's not the end product, it's it's a end product, or it's a version of ourselves that went through a path of transformation and transmutation. And then it's well, that will also change. Consciously or unconsciously, that will also change. So how do we allow that? And I think that's important a lot of times, because there's something that I have noticed through the years with a lot of my clients and my students, but also just in terms of our modern life. There's so much focus on the end result instead of the process. And it's well, yes, of course, we're wanting to get to that job, that relationship, that version of ourselves that feels whatever we want to feel. It's not just about that. It's about understanding there's a process, there's a journey that we go through, and that is as important as the potential end product.
Yeah. Well, and we become the version of ourselves that is capable of living as the end product, quote, by going through that process. You can't skip any steps. And I will say, though, one thing that people commonly ask me about the stages of alchemy are, no, it is not linear, right? We can jump around a little bit in the cycle. And I know everybody's been there where, imagine you're going through a breakup and you're packing up your stuff, and you're also grieving your old relationship, and you're also moving into a new place all simultaneously. So you're kind of jumping around a little bit as you're processing these energies, and you can be in more than one stage at once, whether it's in one area of your life or different areas of your life. So let's say you're in a relationship that's going really well. You're in this fully peaceful, actualized, really healthy expression of your relationship, but your career's in the toilet, right? And so that is possible as well. And again, it's not linear, it's cyclical. It's not, also the amount of time that we can spend in each stage is really variable. Because as I know, particularly if you're doing ancestral healing work, etc., we can be in these very prolonged grief phases, or very prolonged stages of working through these different energies. And then otherwise, or other times, things happen very quickly. So the way that I guide my students through this year-long course is we spend about 7 weeks in each stage of alchemy. But that's not, and I remind them of this all the time. Like, that's not actually how this is going to happen in your life. Like, we're spending about 7 weeks doing practices related to each stage so that you become very familiar with it, and you have these tools and these practices and this material to fall back on for when this is actually what's happening in your life. But for all of you who are tuning in, please know that it is not quite so linearly organized as I presented it here. It is a little bit chaotic, just as life is a little bit chaotic, but it is organized chaos. And again, if you want to kind of dive a little deeper into where you are, figure out where you might be stuck and what would be really helpful to you, like what practices would be very helpful, then go download that guide from their website.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you're saying this. It's not only it's not linear. We don't know like at any point how long anything is going to take, and I think that this is one of the challenges that I see a lot of times with people. People like they come and see me, and it's kind of like, I want the transformation. It's like, okay, I have no idea how long it's going to take. It could be 1 minute, or it could be 1 year. Are you open to however long your timing of processing and integrating and changing needs? And I think that this is important a lot of times, as you're saying. It's like, we're all unique. We all have different like timings for different things, because we're coming here with different talents or skills or gifts and different medicine that we're bringing. So some of the things for some of us, and in one aspect, might seem easier than in other aspects, and other people the other way around. And when we honor that, I think that it's all as well really important.
Yes. Yes. Brian, you also said something earlier that I think is really important to remind people of about being grounded and stable in our lives, in our bodies, in our health. That is, again, like, can be its own episode, but particularly for when we're anchoring in transformation, that's where that very important piece comes is in how are you translating these mystical experiences or these spiritual transformations into your 3D life, into your body, into your health, into your home, your career, and actually really grounding them in, because anyone can do a meditation practice. Like, the way that I teach alchemy is I give people consciousness practices, so like meditation, energy practices, movement practices, doing things in their body, doing qigong, doing different physical work, life practices. So go put this into action in your life. Here's some action steps to take in your material existence. And because there's this aspect of how do we take this off of the meditation cushion and bring it to life in our everyday existence. And, I really don't have any interest in practicing any spiritual technology that doesn't translate off the meditation cushion. Like, that's not worth your time. But if it's something that you can apply in your life in an effective way to help you be a more effective human, to help you be a healthier version of you, and help you participate fully in the earthly aspects of our existence, I think those are very worth our time. And particularly when we look at, okay, how does this translate beyond us? How is this not only for our own personal transformation, but also our collective transformation and our planetary transformation? That's where, my students usually have this kind of little click epiphany about halfway through the course, where it's like, oh yeah, this is for me, but it's also for everyone beyond me. And of course, we know, as all of us have been on the path for a long time, like, what we do for us does ripple out. And especially for people like, I know your audience here, Brian, are very heart-centered, very soul-driven group of people here who are on a mission to be forces of change and transformation and the evolution of our collective consciousness. Keeping that in mind as we're doing this, where it's for us and it's for everybody and it's for the earth herself.
Yes. And like every single time that I work with someone, or that I run a workshop, I run a retreat, every single thing that everyone has done, I thank them. Because as you're saying, what they are doing is also for me. what I'm doing is for them. What you're doing is for me. It's for everyone, really. And I think that the more that we understand that, and that's part of the interconnectedness as well. That's part of understanding how it is that we all, like share in an energy, and how it is that, we can create more change, that it's not just in this like seemingly small vehicle. And so, I see my vehicle as a huge vehicle, and also it's connected to everyone's.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Nice. Michelle, as we are getting closer towards the end of this conversation, because I want
Gosh,
to
that went
honor
so
your
fast.
time. It went so fast. If there's one thing that you wish everybody in the world knew, perhaps it's something that you have already mentioned or something different, what would that be?
That I would like everyone to know in the world. I think knowing, if I could have or offer to everybody to know the stages of alchemy and the cycle of transformation, I would love for everybody to be empowered with that. Because as you mentioned, and as we were talking about, a lot of people are very nervous to even enter that cycle in the first place because they don't know how it works, because they don't understand it, because that fear of loss feels like an insurmountable obstacle. But the promise of alchemy is that rebirth comes after death. The promise of alchemy is that transformation can be organized. And the promise of alchemy is that instead of feeling like you're being dragged behind the forces of change, instead we can collaborate with them, where if we know how it works, we understand the process, we can feel like a very confident, conscious collaborator and empowered to work with these forces, these universal forces and spiritual forces in our lives, rather than feeling like a victim of circumstances or a victim of change. And I would like for everybody to feel empowered in that way.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Michelle, for that. And for everybody that is listening and watching us that perhaps are resonating and would love to know more, perhaps get that, quiz, or just checking where they are in their path and blogs, where can they find you? Where can they follow you? Where can they learn more?
Absolutely. Yeah. So find me through my website, michellehawk.com. That's my name, Michelle Hawk, like the bird. And from there, you can get on my email list. You can download that free guide to the cycle of alchemy. I am on Instagram sometimes. I wouldn't recommend starting there. Go, sign up for my emails first. You can always send me an email. You can book a chat with me. The I Am Alchemy course, which is the 200-hour alchemy certification course that I mentioned, begins every spring. So if you are feeling called to the mysteries of alchemy, you can go ahead and book a chat with me, book an interview to see if this course is the right fit for you. The people who take this course are about 50-50 practitioners and not practitioners. So some of the people in the course are coaches, healers, body workers, therapists, social workers, counselors, physicians assistants, acupuncturists, naturopaths, like some version of service providers, and who will want to cultivate their spiritual skill development, not only for themselves, but also for their service. And then the other half of the students are not practitioners, but they're wanting to go through this process for themselves and then translate that into their lives. And of course, people are in my cohorts are also working in law, in academia, in like public policy, and then translating their alchemical principles into other areas of the world as well. So again, if this is calling to you, then please reach out to me, and I would be happy to talk with you about your process of transformation.
Beautiful. So as you said, like I'll have all of this in the show notes so that everybody you can get easy access to it. For everybody that you've been watching and listening to us, what resonated with you? What did you hear? What have you already been, perhaps practicing? Where are you in your path of transformation and transmutation and alchemy? Are you grounding? No. We'd love to know. Keep the conversation going, whatever it is that you're finding this episode. And thank you so much, Michelle, for the time and for sharing and for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Brian. This was really a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your insights and questions as well. And to all of you tuning in, I hope this was helpful. I hope something here sparked some inspiration or understanding for you. And best wishes. I hope to be in touch soon.
Beautiful. So thank you, Michelle, once more. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you all in the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.